Welcome back, everyone, to These Aren't the Nerds You're Looking For. Kevin Horde here.
Lorenzo sitting here.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, man. It's been a second since we've actually recorded. So
yeah, for everybody else, it's been a week.
Just a solid week, as always. I think we always mention the time dilation for us that for everybody else just generally doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's been a week. For us, it's been almost a month.
Almost a month. I noticed that. Yeah. So
yeah.
it's
we spent the past 2 weeks chilling with Gary from Harry Potter Minute at the Gary Roby on Twitter. That was a blast.
So much fun.
I need to go back and maybe give those a listen to.
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun for sure. Yeah. So shouts out to Gary. Thank you again. Yeah.
And it's always fun getting a completely different viewpoint. You know?
For sure.
And especially with him, and I think you mentioned it on the shows too, where we didn't intend to have the guy from Harry Potter Minute on the episodes that happen to have magic systems introduced.
Yeah, magic with a K.
Yeah. So that was fun getting to go deep dive. We haven't done that in a long time in that fashion. So
yeah, absolutely. So
yeah. But we're moving forward now. We're in a new season.
Season 5. How about that?
Yeah, and man.
We're going to skip episode 1, jump straight to episode 2. Why not, right? So this is season 5, episode 2, A War on Two Fronts. This the air date on this is a little funky.
Super weird. Yeah, I don't even know.
So it says September 21st, 2012, and this was for a Lucasfilm Ltd. Letterman Digital Arts Center. I don't understand.
So I didn't look farther into it, but what this sounds like is that they did some sort of premiere screening for fans. So by invitation only of some sort. Mm-hmm. Happened here. So it happened at Lucasfilm Limited's headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And the Letterman Digital Arts Center is the specific theater where this episode screened first on September 21st.
Yeah, I gathered that, but I would imagine that this happens, right? So I don't know why it's noted on this episode.
It seemed... I don't think this happens as often as you think it might for television series. At least not for Cartoon Network ones, per se. The television premieres have maybe in the last decade really become an event.
Okay.
Since we've this is going to be one of our as I just said, we haven't done a sidestep in a while.
Sure.
Here's a contextual sort of look at television, at least from my understanding. And again, I'm not deep in the industry of it per se, but I'm just a huge nerd that works in the periphery of it.
Right.
I've never worked for a major studio or anything like that. But movie premieres, they go to Chinese theater in Hollywood. They do they have the red carpet, all that. That doesn't typically happen for television. It has more so lately just because of the sort of budget and buzz that different networks are trying to drum up around, especially new series, right? So Mandalorian, I believe, did it. They had a cool red carpet event. They screened the first 2 episodes, I believe. I'm trying to think of other series that I for sure know off the top of my head that did it, but I can't I can't name one with 100% confidence.
Right.
But Netflix series have been doing this a lot lately to try and drum up buzz and social media support and kind of get it out there. They might not always be at the Chinese theater, but there are a lot of venues around LA that will host these sort of events, no problem, right? But they'll invite people that aren't part of Mandalorian per se, so stars from the movies can come and that sort of thing, right? And it's just having people there and drumming up buzz and then other industry insiders, journalists, and publications, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, the trade publications, things like that, right, will show up. But in this case, this looks from like the one line that we get on Wikipedia where it says a special screening for fans.
Does it
this
say that?
Seems like yes. So this does seem to be some sort of special case scenario, because it has noted on other things where, like with Resistance for season 2, it did note the premiere date at Star Wars Celebration, right?
Yeah, so I get that. But I guess the reason I'm questioning this is, like, okay, firstly, I didn't read the at special screening for fans at Lucasfilm Ltd, right? But if you search both by September 21st on Wikipedia and 2012 on Wikipedia, there is nothing on... If you go through September 21st, there's nothing listed as being an occurrence in 2012. And if you go through 2012, there's nothing listed as being an occurrence September 21st. So it's just, I guess, a unique situation where it's not centered around something else. It just seems to have been a thing that happened.
Yeah. And again, I didn't do any research into what fans were chosen or how they got there, or, who went out to Marin County to watch this, Yep. But it seems like Wikipedia likes to note, obviously, like first screening for some public, like non-industry public, right? Because there are other like sorts of premieres that will happen, right? Like
for sure,
the premieres are not generally the first time a finished movie is seen by people in general. There are occurrences where like it's being edited up to that premiere point, that's happened. Infamously, like Return of the King was still being edited piece by piece up until like the day before or the day of, maybe even for the premiere, So like Peter Jackson's first time actually seeing the movie from start to finish was at that premiere in New Zealand. But yeah, so Wikipedia is always kind of listed just any sort of various premiere dates in different areas, like UK, Canada, and now this would be the first occurrence of like a special event screening that I've noticed for Clone Wars,
Yeah, out of curiosity, I went to season 5, episode 1, and its screening was August 24th, 2012, which would have been Star Wars Celebration, and then its actual air date was September 28th, which was a week after the special screening of the episode that came out after this.
Right.
So, anyway, I think that we have milked all of the information out of
for sure
out of that we could. Officially, it came out October 6th in the U.S. and October 5th in Canada. We've seen those one or two off dates before between U.S., Canada, U.K., and whatnot.
For sure.
Again, this is called A War on Two Fronts. Jumping into kind of the content of the episode, the fortune cookie is fear is a malleable weapon. Who you got on this one?
This is there are two options that fit this for me. It's either Palpy or Dooku. I could see either of them working with this one.
Okay.
For that one, it's in the air. Either of them could easily say that. They both seem to relish in pushing fear.
Yeah.
Onto unknowing victims, shall we say? Right?
Yeah, I would go with either of those. So, I completely agree with you there. I'm just gonna write down Dooku because I think that he's maybe a little more vocal on the subject.
I agree with you there for sure. Yeah.
After that, we jump into the newsreel. From my perspective, this all looked like new footage in the newsreel itself. Often we see not necessarily new footage. It could be pulled from other episodes or something. But yeah, the newsreel just kind of jumps in. It talks about the Separatists taking over a planet, Onderon, and I guess we kind of see how that plays out in just a little montage, and it catches us up to the episode proper, where we see Lux Bontari, and a new character that is not named at this time, but we learned later in the episode that it's Gerrera.
Yep.
And these guys are freedom fighters on Onderon. They're not okay with the Separatists having taken over their planet. And they plan to do something about it. And what they do is they video Skype into the Jedi Council.
Yes. Yep.
And
there's an interesting conversation.
Kind of. Go ahead.
What's that?
I said they kind of plead their case, kind of.
Yeah, they plead their case, and then that itself leads to disagreement within the Jedi Council.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fairly complex matter that they tackle within the first 2 minutes of this episode.
Yeah.
In terms of their place in this specific fight.
Right.
Because I forgive me, I don't recall who says exactly what, but somebody mentions that the new king that has been put in place on Onderon is in all cases a legitimate king.
Yeah. So that's something that Obi-Wan says. He says, you know, your king was elected. He's the ruler of your planet, and he chose to align himself with the Separatists. There's nothing that we can do about it. Right. You guys are kind of on your own.
Right. So, like, I get that point, and then it's Anakin who believes that they should help a rebellion or an insurgency, or...
Mm-hmm.
But then Obi-Wan likens that to terrorism, right? Which is a complex issue, yes. You know?
Right.
And Anakin doesn't shoot that idea down per se, but just tries to put a nicer label on it, right? So it's like, no, we're just going to lead a rebellion.
They're both basically presenting the facts as they see them from a certain point of view, right?
Correct, yeah.
And I think Obi-Wan's being a little more conservative about his approach to the situation, basically saying, you know, the government of this planet, which is legitimate, chose to side this way in the war just because all of the citizens don't believe that that is the way that things should go doesn't mean that we should just rush in and fight the government.
Right.
And Anakin is saying, you know, there's all these different cells of groups of people like this on different systems, and we should encourage them to fight for what they see as being right, as so long as it aligns with our views of what we see as being right, essentially.
Right.
In the end, Yoda agrees, kind of. What's he say? He says train and observe only, and then he says we'll send in like advisors or some shit.
Right.
And those
like it's this is a weird line. Like I get it. So it's like it's trying to play both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll help out the faction of group people that don't agree with the government, but they won't go so far as to help a rebellion themselves, you know?
Right. Like we can't align ourselves with the rebellion, but we can help them help themselves. Is essentially the plot line of what's going to happen throughout this episode. So
yeah, that point is interesting. So, and then pretty much from there, they speed off to Onderon, right?
Yep. And Obi-Wan says he's going, so then we cut to a ship in flight. There is a quote-unquote drop zone that they are approaching. And then we see 4 people, which is Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka. And then at first I was like, all right, who's this other guy? Turns out that it's Rex, but he's in not civilian clothes. He's in like military officer garb.
Yeah.
And he's got a jetpack.
And like goggles, right?
He's got goggles.
It's a different look for sure.
How did you feel about his new look?
I liked the look. It was cool. I don't know what the purpose of the look was, honestly.
Like why he's not just in his regular armor?
Yeah, just regular armor. Like I don't know if that would stand out too much, but you already have 3 Jedi there, you know?
Yeah.
And they're definitely trying to be under the radar. They're like dropped out in the middle of a forest of some sort.
Right.
But then the rebellion folks, they already have like a bunch of military grade weaponry and captured droids and droid tanks. Where'd that come from? Right?
I had a question about that. So after we're planet side, my next note was that Anakin gets caught. Like it seems curious that the Jedi with superhuman premonition gets caught by a lady riding up on a dinosaur in the forest.
Yeah.
But that totally happens. And then, like, Anakin's surrounded, but then, like, everybody is surrounded by the other members of Anakin's crew. And it doesn't matter because it all pans out where Anakin identifies himself and he's like, hey, we're friends. We're here to help. And this new character, Steela, who also turns out to be a Gerrera. Yep. You know, I learned that from the credits. Is this Saw's daughter, wife, sister?
No, sister.
Sister?
I believe. Yeah, it's Saw's sister.
Okay. Where does that information come from?
Not in the not here not in this episode.
In a future episode?
Oh, I don't remember. I remember. I will admit to vaguely remembering this episode existed before we got to this point in rewatching and reviewing it. Yep. I do remember this episode for the very reason that Saw himself becomes a bigger player in the greater universe of Star Wars, right?
Right.
So because of that, later that backfilled my memory of this episode.
Yeah, I knew Saw was going to pop up, and I knew that the character may be a little bit different than what we see in the future, but I didn't remember all the details of it. So I was unsure of his relationship with Steela, but I guess it makes sense that she's like his younger sister, because there's some weird romantic entanglement that goes on in this episode.
But never between Steela and Saw. They're pretty clear about that. Like,
correct.
The romantic entanglements are the threads are clear, and there is not one between Steela and Saw, so that never gets confused the way other relations do, say in The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
But as to where the information of her being his sister, that's just one of those things I kind of knew, but now that I think about it, I don't recall if it's in a future episode, if that gets...
So it's something you remember from the future, but you don't know why you remember it?
Yes, yeah.
I'm down with that explanation.
So we'll discover down the line if it ever does get mentioned in the show, you know?
Cool. Yeah, I was unaware that she was a Gerrera until reading the end credits.
Until this exact time, yeah.
Yeah. So
for some reason, even from my first view through, I never questioned them as not being related. You know, because they are their animation design. They feature the same eyes essentially. They have the same features there. So they have the exact same eye color, similar features in terms of how they look as well. Skin tone, all that sort of detail is similar. So I'm curious to see when that does get mentioned, if at all. So
we will either get there eventually or it doesn't exist.
Yeah. But to confirm, this is the first appearance of Saw Gerrera. So
yeah.
Yep.
So immediately after Steela and Anakin kind of say hello to each other, she recognizes him as Jedi, as soon as he drops his hood.
Yeah.
Not before. So this leads me to believe that she recognizes him, and maybe there's been more communication back and forth between the Jedi Council and her brother, right?
Yeah, I think everybody was expecting this group of people to come up because they had just had that like hollow Skype call, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, like the Skype call had ended before Yoda agreed to let this thing happen.
I think there's more that we probably jump over and don't see, right?
Okay.
So, you know.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Yeah, like,
but immediately she's like, okay, I'll show you where our hidden base is. Like, describes as like hidden base, which is really just a collection of kind of junk.
And a few huts and pens for some animals.
Yeah, which is not very far away. I think Rex describes it as like a half a click.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how far a click is. I know we've talked about that before, but, a half a standard unit of distance on a planetary surface. It's not that far. So she leads them there, and then we get like this dramatic entrance of Saw Gerrera himself riding some winged beast. They have a combination of dinosaur-esque type creatures that they have tamed, and then also more Bovian, right?
Yeah.
Or beast of burden type things.
Just to confirm, a click is a kilometer, by the way.
Okay.
I wanted to double check that before I said that out loud, but it is a click is indeed a kilometer. So
wonderful.
Just just 500 meters away. Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Easy
very
as
far
that.
at all.
Nope. No. Just yeah. But yeah, I will say back to there are a lot of creatures in this episode that while I was watching the episode, I like in the back of my mind I noticed, but now that we're talking about the creatures they're riding and what will happen later, and then even later in the episode, the animation on the creature department here is that budget got expanded a little bit. It looks like.
Yeah, and they look similar to other things that we have seen, but they're not like an exact match.
Right.
And then there's some that are just like background creatures that are
just hanging out.
Like there's one shot of some tiny little two-legged thing like running away, and it has like a trill noise that it makes that I swear is straight out of Jurassic Park. And I'm like, okay, I get it. They have like weird creatures and dinosaur things and winged beast and whatnot.
They're probably pulling from the same library, so
yeah, I would believe it. At this point, I guess we get just kind of an overall, everybody introduces themselves to each other. This is when we get the name Saw Gerrera. And Steela is like, yeah, he fancies himself our leader, even though nobody elected him that. And Anakin's like, I don't give a shit. We're in charge. Here's what we're going to do. And then we get a couple of different, I won't say training montages, but there's like 3 specific things that Annie's group trains these rebels in. And then that is interspersed with Ahsoka and Lux kind of reuniting, and this is where like the first relationship tension comes from.
Yeah.
And then kind of continues separately in different directions. It's weird. It's not set up as like a 3-way, like multiple people interested in a single person, but there's like a couple of different potential couples kind of where
what I wrote in my notes was that this is a love triangle where no one appears to know that they're in love. Right? So just kind of jumping ahead just a little bit. So like we get a cold spell from Steela towards Ahsoka. Then we get Ahsoka jealous of any interaction between Lux and Steela.
Mm-hmm.
Lux doesn't really, like, he seems affectionate towards Steela, but nothing that is beyond, per se, like, friend zoning, right?
Yeah, I would say he's just kind of more dedicated to, like, the family that they've become.
Right. And then, so that still leaves Ahsoka on the other side of that, but then she's also a Jedi anyways, so, like, that, it's weird. Like, they're trying to create this drama without really setting the details, right?
I would totally agree with that.
So it was kind of a weird additional layer that depending on how this plays out in the future, but as of this specific episode, there was nothing really I saw that was necessary for that.
Yeah. And then I think when you combined that with, I guess I'll start at the beginning. So the setup for it is when Lux and Ahsoka reunite. Lux is basically like all business, and I think Ahsoka is a little taken aback, right? And then immediately Steela is like jealous, and like they have their moment or whatever. And then later Ahsoka's jealous, and then oddly, like, Saw Gerrera comes up and he's like, "Hey, Commander, why don't you help me out with this thing we're working on?" And I'm like, is that supposed to be some weird foil to, like, this other relationship thing going on?
I don't think it was. Like, I know exactly the moment you're talking about, and if it was meant to play that way, it doesn't come off that way at all. It definitely just comes off as, like, Saw or Ahsoka needing to be distracted from her jealous look towards Steela and Lux training together.
Yeah, but, like, right before that, Saw, like, looks over and there's, like, a moment, like a background moment between Steela and Lux. And that's when he, like, approaches Ahsoka, and that just seemed kind of awkward or whatever. But Ahsoka is still like, yeah, I'll totally help you. But then instead of paying attention to what she's supposed to be doing, she's, like, distantly gazing upon Steela and Lux. And then at one point in time in the episode, Anakin is straight up like, "Yo, you distracted? Like, what's up?"
Right, exactly.
And she's like, "No, I'm good." And then after that, like, everything's good. And she even takes, like, Steela aside at one point in time and is like giving her a pep talk. And then all potential relationship tension dissolves.
Right. Like, it's a completely...
It's just gone. It's all mitigated.
All gone.
Like, it's...
It's like it's a very sincere pep talk, right? There's a goal that they need to address, and Ahsoka is there to help Steela meet that goal, and it comes from a very sincere place. There is no drama tinged with it whatsoever. It's so, again, that's what it's weird. It's just,
it is weird.
It's this whole subtext that is trying to be laid in it's half-assed, shall I say?
Okay.
Right?
I was going to ask if you thought that this was underdeveloped, or if you thought that this was, like, a moot point that was, like, overdeveloped. But I think you're going to go with the first one.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
I'm on the same page with you.
I just don't know where it's going to... I don't remember how this specific bit pays off, if it does, right?
I don't think anything's going to come of it. The only thing that I can think is, like, in the future, like, Lux dies or something, or sacrifices himself for one of the two of these ladies, and that everybody feels good and bad about it.
Yeah, but not, again, I don't recall it being on, like, a romantic level, you know?
Right.
I always remember it being on the friendly level. So, again, rewatching this episode for our purposes here, I was just I didn't recall these weird glances and And if
there's a lot of sideways glances in this episode.
Yeah. So to your point, it's underdeveloped. It goes nowhere. It's unnecessary, and it's sloppy. Honestly, to me too.
Okay.
Just because the rest of the episode has such a specific goal already that they established at the beginning of this episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Train these people. We're not to get involved, but let's get them self-sufficient.
Yep.
And then it tries to throw in this thing based on like the interactions Ahsoka and Lux have had before. But again, that none of this felt earned from my memory of how they interacted before, right?
Yeah, I felt like there was definitely more sexual tension between the two of them the last time that they were together.
Yeah.
But maybe this is supposed to show that like Lux has been like hardened by war and he's more like business guy now. If that's the purpose, it doesn't come across like that.
No.
It's yeah.
That's a weird point.
Hopefully in the future we will get some clarification on what's going on with this little subplot worth of relationshipiness going on.
For sure.
The main focus of this episode is the training part, right? And there's three things that they train on. The first being that the MTTs, the droid tanks, have like two hatches, and you have to essentially throw a bomb in both hatches to disable the entire thing. Rex has some mad fucking acrobatic skills all of a sudden.
Yeah.
He's doing like, I don't even know I call it a loop-de-loop, but that's totally
like a
gymnastics.
He does like a full gymnastic bar.
Yeah.
Like swoop around the like nozzle of the tank, right?
Yeah, the turd of the cannon. And then does like a backflip off the top of it.
Right.
Unaided by anything.
While holding two grenades that he throws into each hatch. And sure, yeah.
But I mean, at the beginning of the episode, he needed a rocket pack to jump out of a ship and land on the ground. So there's that. Lux and Saw Gerrera try to accomplish the same thing, and it does not work out well for them. They are sans acrobatics, but Lux knocks them both down, and Saw is not so happy. And then
they make a point to point out that because Lux and Saw have like a friendly competition with each other, they get in each other's way to accomplish the shared goal.
Yeah, I think Obi-Wan says something like, I'm not sure who they would rather be fighting, the droids or themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all the weird relationship shit that happens along the way, but the next, I guess, plot box that needs to be checked is the next training thing, which is fighting droidicas. And the reason I say it's like a plot box that needs to be checked is because they're using droid poppers, which Anakin suggests to Yoda at the beginning of the episode by saying, like, we won't actually give them weapons of war, we'll give them something that is targeted at non-organics, targeted at droids, right? Mm-hmm. So this is, I guess, supposed to check off that gun, maybe, not really sure. But so the training is that somebody needs to distract them, because Anakin's like, oh, they have two weaknesses, and I was thinking, okay, what are, I'm like waiting for their weaknesses, because I know they got these droid popper things, and the weaknesses are get something past the shield, and you can do this by inserting it in slowly.
Yeah.
And the other weakness is that they pay attention to what's in front of them and not behind them.
They can't see behind them, yeah.
So there's a whole section of this episode dedicated to rolling a metal ball through a shield.
Yeah, gently enough so it can pass through the shield.
but with enough speed that it makes it all the way there.
Yep.
This is where all the tension between peoples comes from. Is this ball rolling event. It's like a boring version of force field bocce or bowling or something. And
it's like dry land curling, essentially, right? Like,
yeah, except for you don't have the person like trying to influence the secondary person trying to influence the direction of the stone or the ball that is thrown.
But what I mean is like the concept of like getting it on a target via sliding that you can't go past it. You can't go. You want to get it right there.
Yeah, maybe shuffleboard would be a closer analog to that.
I never played shuffleboard, so I don't know how that works. So
it's like curling, but on a table.
But on dry stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So question, Lorenzo.
Yeah.
You've never played shuffleboard, so you didn't quite feel that reference, but have you curled before?
I haven't curled, but I watch a lot of curling during the Olympics. So I actually genuinely love watching curling during the Olympics. So
myself as well.
Whereas
favorite
like shuffleboard,
winter sport.
Whereas like shuffleboard, it's like I just don't have experience with it. Like I've seen the shuffleboard things. I've never seen anybody play it. I've never played it myself. So.
It is a similar game to curling, except for, like I said, you don't have that secondary influence, and you're sliding a puck across a surface that has some type of slickening agent. It looks like salt. It does not taste like it.
Is the tabletop one in a bar? Is that also shuffleboard? Is that like a smaller, taller version of shuffleboard as well, or is that something different?
That is, yeah. That's totally, right? Yeah.
Same
that's
thing,
a
right?
tabletop shuffleboard as opposed to, like if you play on the ground, like you have like a cue or a stick that pushes the disc.
Yeah.
But the object is the same. You get it down to a target where you accrue points.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
Never played either of them. Never played it. I've seen both versions. I've been to places with one or the other version before. Just never interacted with them myself. So
I have played both. I have never curled.
Yep, never curled. That's for sure.
But we do have droid popper shuffleboarding.
Yeah, which I get it. But I'm not gonna lie. Visually speaking, this section
it drags on too long, man.
Oh my god, I was so bored during this whole section. This whole interlude was just visually not interesting in the fucking least.
Yeah, this section is really just a companion piece to the relationship things that are going on that are unclear as to how we are supposed to be feeling about them.
Right.
And then really in the end what happens is that Steela can't fucking get it. Right? And so she's sad, and that's when Ahsoka comes over and gives her pep talk, and Steela just kind of sulks off and grabs her blaster, and then lo and behold we find out that she's awesome with a blaster. So then she's like shooting droid heads because Anakin says is it either Anakin or Rex says the only way to take out a droid is via the head.
Rex says
like
that.
Headshot because they need neither arms nor legs nor body to transmit information back to their leaders, right? Back to the Seps, back to the Clankers, whatever. Is this true? Because 99% of the time we see droids like cut in half with lightsabers or shot in the chest or, knocked down with droid poppers or pushed over with the Force. Like there's very few headshots deliberate as a means of eradication of these droids up to this point.
Yeah, like any torso or headshot seems to have always worked before. Yeah.
Yep.
So no, I don't know where this information comes from, but yeah.
I think it's contradictory to what we have seen in the past, and I don't
for sure.
like it.
Oh, yeah.
But it does give Steela the opportunity to show off her blaster prowess. And then she is supposed to, like, continue practicing or something. Like, Ahsoka picks up a droid head with the Force and is, like, shaking it around in the air because a moving target is harder than a stationary target.
But it doesn't look like she's actually moving it that much, which was super annoying to me. I don't know if you got the sense, but, like, it looked like it was maybe moving, like, back and forth, like, a foot in space at most.
I mean,
laterally.
It's kind of like the training probe that Luke was using on the Falcon. So,
but that's different
because much
he's
movement there.
He's supposed to try and block what it's shooting at him.
I thought he was supposed to deflect it back at it.
I didn't even think it was that. I thought he was just trying to block it from hitting him, right? Because he gets like seared at some point, right? He gets zapped, right?
He does get zapped.
Whereas in this one, it's target practice for sharpshooting,
Yep.
So, like, she's shooting at something that's essentially swaying as much as, I don't fucking know, just a weight on the end of a string. Like, that's as much as moving, like swaying in the wind, right?
Yeah, it's not unlike those maneuvers that Han Solo knows. I think on Family Guy, Chris's character is like, oh, what, drifting lazily to the left? Like, that's your evasive maneuver? So, there's precedent for something that is not quite outstanding or visually exciting, but standing in for something that is meant to be challenging for somebody else.
Well, also, what's weird to me is, like, if you spend this whole episode pointing out that this is a group that needs to be trained in the ways of warfare, and you have a character that is failing at it, but they're good at this other thing that's just getting revealed now, and then to show it off, she shoots at a thing twice that doesn't move around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wouldn't have taken that much more to just sell that idea.
I feel like they could have just, like, lined up all the, like, evaluate the skills of the people you're training before you're like, these are what you need to, these are the things you need to learn.
Exactly. It's such, like, a left field reveal with no backing for it, So for me, they didn't earn this bit of information at all. Like, they left it, they dropped it. I don't feel it, I don't know it per se in my psyche, in my heart here, But so that part was weird. And then it leads to this other weird reveal where she spots more droids coming.
She does spot more droids coming, and one little tidbit that we skipped over earlier is that at some point we cut over to, like, the droid camp. It's at this city named Isis, spelled I-Z-I-Z.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It stood out to me. I was like, I don't know if this is, like, a deliberate thing or if this is just, like, an oversight, but
I think it's, well, number one, from my quick look into it, this was a Legends planet, or it wouldn't have been Legends at the time, but this planet has appeared in other Star Wars property.
Okay.
So it was in Knights of the Old Republic 2, and then they just carried it over to here.
Okay.
Right? And then ISIS just in the real world already has other connotation that just then got unfortunately flipped into the name of a terrorist group in real life, right? So I don't. This is I'm not making equivalence.
Sure.
I'm just saying these are similar, but it's the way that the swastika is a religious symbol for many religions around the world, but it definitely means a thing now, right?
Yeah,
But
I think that's a little bit different than the than the word ISIS, right?
right, that's what I'm saying. So like it's not, I'm not making an equivalent. I'm just saying that like the word ISIS in general existed before world events applied it to a very specific thing.
This is the first time it appears in canon, though. I can tell you that much.
Right. But like I said, it had appeared in other Star Wars property before.
I do see that.
It's the first time it appears in canon when you acknowledge that the other canon had been wiped out.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Okay. I'll go with it.
Like everything else was still canon when this came out to some degree.
True.
You know, the messy canon that it was, right?
Okay.
And then, so they're like, hey, let's just call this thing ISIS because that's a cool name and we should use this planet more and it already exists in this universe, so why not? And then real world events happen and then suddenly it's, you know. Or here, another example is how in the movie Tangled, Rapunzel is locked in a tower away. And the whole first song is about how she's bored because her whole days are locked inside of the tower and she's just doing the same shit over and over again.
Yeah.
The kingdom that her family, or that her mom and dad run, is the kingdom of Corona. So, yeah, that's...
Yeah, I mean, Corona means...
Crown. But also nowadays, with the connotation of Corona and getting locked inside, not being able to do anything that you want to do is just,
Yeah, I totally didn't even make that connection. Look at me.
So that, late March when people started, coming around to that one where everybody was like, holy shit, god damn it, guys. Like, because, side note, like a couple Disney theme parks around the world will still get the Corona Land section of theme parks. So, I believe Hong Kong is the one getting that one too, of all places. So
interesting.
They'll have Arendelle from Frozen and they'll have Corona from Tangled.
So in Corona Land, you just go and you just sit, right? And then you
just
can't get out.
Yeah. You get locked in the tower, and you just hang out. You paint. You learn miming. You start
a
ventriloquism.
podcast.
Yeah, shit like that. Just basic ass shit. You don't shave. You grow your hair out real long. So
fair enough.
So but again, it's just like funny. So like you said, Corona meant crown, but now. And it still does, right? Like that's why it's called a corona. Like that's why the coronaviruses are called that, because under a microscope, the little arms that pop out looks like the corona of a solar eclipse that we see, which itself is also called the corona because it's
it's the haloic crown of light.
Yes, and then just. World events change the context under which we see certain things, right? So,
yeah, I was just wondering if they were somebody was trying to impose the connection of ISIS, the terrorist organization, and Saw Gerrera, the rebels currently.
I don't
functioning as a terrorist organization, but I think I think that's a stretch. I don't think
I agree. I don't think that. Not to say that the thought wasn't put into this episode in general, but I don't think the thought was applied in that direction. Shall we say?
Fair enough.
Right.
So where do we go from here? We got a droid battle, right?
Yeah, it's just a quick droid battle, and it shows that our rebels did learn from the Jedi. They picked up all the tips and tricks, and they do readily waste the droids.
Yes.
And to a separate degree as well, Steela comes up with her own way to handle by opening up the pens with the various animals, and that helps add to the chaos of them defeating the droids as well.
Because the animals like stampede and run over a bunch of droids.
Yep.
There is a conspicuous lack of droidicas in this battle, considering that we spent a good majority of the middle third of this episode
Right.
bowling for
Yeah.
droidicas.
Right. Just trying to get that stone past the shield. Yeah. So, yeah, there's not a 1-to-1 ratio of like lessons learned and lessons applied.
No, it's pretty much a shootout, and then 0 droidicas, and
Like one tank gets taken out.
One tank gets taken out, and then everybody celebrates. But if they couldn't take tanks out to begin with, back to your question from earlier in the episode, is where the fuck did these tanks and
Like these
reprogrammed droids come from?
Right.
And I was wondering if this is equipment that was dropped by Anakin and his crew, because when we first arrive on planet, Rex is like, hey, I need volunteers to head a half a click west, or whichever direction it is, to pick up the rest of our supplies that were dropped at the drop zone. So did they bring this shit with them?
That's likely. I
think that makes more sense than Gerrera's people already having this stuff there, because like these droidicas have been reprogrammed.
Yeah.
And they're under the control of Rex.
I assumed it was training equipment that was brought by the Jedi, but it's still like it just still kind of just shows up.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So in having no textual evidence for it, I just assumed that the Jedi brought that stuff.
Okay.
But it's still like a tank and droidicas, like
and more than one tank.
Right. So it's a stretch either way, you know. So that's why I was just like, I don't know where this is coming from, but I'm just gonna move forward with my life on that one. So.
And also, like, the whole process of getting the shit down to the planet.
Right. And they were they were discreet, and they were sneaking around the forest when they first showed up. Like,
but now they're
dropping off tanks.
Yeah.
You know.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But anyway, these people were found by some probe droids that were sent out by the droid army. We get this droid fight. Our new rebels are victorious, and this leads them to decide that they are going to infiltrate the city of Isis and try to find some supporters and then attack from within, ?
Yeah.
And then with the ability to like blend back into the normal citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's like, oh man, how are we going to sneak through the door? I bet there's guards. And Lux is like, I have an idea. And we immediately cut to what his idea is, which is to pretend to be hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, like hunter-gatherer merchants that want to sell their goods in the city. Because the droid is like, did you sign out or whatever? You know, did you fill out an official permit or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, we actually
don't. Did you register?
Yeah, register. And the excuse that he comes up with is like, we don't actually live here. We're just out for like months at a time. So that's why we don't register when we leave, because we don't actually live here or something, you know.
Right. And we go out and we hunt and gather, and then we come back and we sell it.
Yeah. And their argument for why this plan would work is just because the droids are just that dumb.
Yeah.
But it just, to some degree, it worked. You know, they sneak in. There's no real issue. They're just like, yeah, it's hard to tell with all this organic material that we just did on the scan here. So, you know, nothing seems bad. We'll just let them in.
So what is all this organic material?
I thought they were hiding people. I thought they were hiding more people in there, but I could be wrong.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought they were hiding a bunch of people. So, and then they were passing it off as like carcasses or something, you know?
Huh.
Because it'll still all register as organic material.
Yeah, I feel like there's like some life form scan that could have been done here.
That determines if the organic material is alive or dead.
Yeah.
I agree. No, I completely agree with that assessment. So
Like this is like Arnold Schwarzenegger laying down the mud in Predator, and
Right.
that fools the Predator's infrared eyesight.
The vision, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not down.
I completely agree. Absolutely, completely agree.
Maybe it's because Lux offered like some berries or tripe or something.
Well, because like there's that offer, and then there's like a rando other person on the back of the cavalcade that is like, "Hey, hurry up! We have all this stuff to sell inside the city."
We gotta sell it by supper.
Right.
We got to sell it by supper.
So then the droid totally gives in to this like essential like Karen at this point. Like,
yep. He's just like, I don't care, whatever. Let him in.
right, exactly. Just move on in. Move along now. You're good.
And then there's this like weird thing where everybody just splits up, and Saw's like, yeah, we'll recoordinate later after it gets dark.
Right. So
and even Obi-Wan and Anakin go different directions.
Mm-hmm. So they say they're going to split up to secure vital supplies.
Uh-huh.
And that's the reason for splitting up.
And Ahsoka is like, Rex and I are going to go and grab the shit you need. Yeah. Which is confusing to me. So back during this droid battle, this brief droid battle that happened, Anakin wants to push the front line and like take all these droids out.
Mm-hmm.
And Obi-Wan is like, no, we can't do that because that would be us being on the offensive. Like, we can only defend these people and help them fight their own war. We can't fight it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 3 minutes until all the droids are dead because they got stampeded by various animals.
Right.
Anakin is like, great, now we're going to take the fight to the city.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan's like, okay, cool, let's do it. Plan sounds clean.
No. As soon as training was over and that first battle was over, because that was an ambush attack, so like I get why the Jedi were still there, at least defending them.
Right.
Why they're still involved in any of this at this point, I have no idea. I was confused by this as well.
They shouldn't be. Like, that should be the point where Obi-Wan is like, Anakin, this is why I came along, because I knew you were going to press the issue and keep on going until ultimate victory. Our job is completed. It's time for us to go.
Absolutely. So nope. We're on the same page of that one. I got nothing.
Yeah, this split up is the end of the episode. Mm-hmm. Cue loud music, Iverson, all that jazz, right?
Yeah.
This is not the end of the storyline.
Definitely not.
Do you think we'll find out answers to any of these questions, like why Obi-Wan agrees to continue sticking around, or
maybe, yeah. I mean, it's just weird. Like, I don't think we'll get the answers to the question. I think the episode will just barrel forward as if that question shouldn't be asked.
It'll just move on to something else.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that's a question that they're even thinking about regarding, the writing team here, so which I don't think we mentioned. This episode is actually directed by Dave Filoni, and it's written by Chris Collins. So.
Chris Collins sounds like a new name.
Yeah, that's not a name I don't recall too often at all.
Right.
So, but yeah, so it's a weird point. Like they set up confines at the beginning of this episode and then completely ignore them later on.
Yeah.
Even throughout the episode, they set up new confines and then throw them out, Yeah. So, yeah, this episode, I'm not confident the questions that you and I are asking each other regarding this episode. I'm not confident that the series will address them later.
Okay. Do you think these are common, like, what the fucks when people like watched this back in the day? Like, did these questions arise in the common viewer, or are we looking too deeply into this and other people just kind of saw it and they were like, yeah, okay. Like,
I mean, I feel like I had a lot of questions with this series, specific to this. I can't say with certainty that if I ever questioned this, I probably did to some degree, just because truth be known, I mean, it shouldn't be surprising anybody, but like I was not the biggest fan of Clone Wars for reasons like this, you know.
Okay.
For loose ends and loose writing of this sort.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find people on the spectrum that regarding, say, this episode, you know, some people might not have thought of it at all, but there will be other people that don't have to have this 30-minute, hour-long sit down, you know, and get into it before they start asking these questions. I'm sure there are people out there that are like, wait, I thought the training was it, you know?
Yeah, I think that I think this episode brings up more questions than it gives anything else. Let's get into thumbs up, thumbs down, and then we'll continue from there.
Yeah.
Because I do have 2 other questions or comments, but we can definitely address that after our final judgment. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm giving this one a thumbs down.
Okay. I will straight up say I am in agreement with you.
Okay, yeah.
And then we can discuss.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say this is an outright bad episode. I was just so bored by this one. And like, knowing the reason I have to watch the show, which is to like actually have an in-depth conversation with it, I admit to like other television programming. There are certain shows I sit and focus on, right? There are certain shows that are built that way, right? But then there's like some times where TV, like on a certain evening, I just need to just mentally check out.
Yep.
So I'll throw on like Queer Eye, but still like do something else in the background to some degree, you know? Like that's not a show you need to like pay attention to the plot detail per se, right?
Right.
But with this episode, despite having pen and paper in front of me to take notes and stuff, I found myself just like getting distracted. I paused it at some point to go get like more food, you know, and went to the restroom and stuff just because I just could not pay attention to this one. Despite the fact that it introduces Saw Gerrera, who we know goes on to be like a huge character in the rest of the universe of the series.
Right.
Not just Clone Wars, but Star Wars is overall. And I just was so fucking bored with this episode. And we've touched upon it, so I just want to bring it up in one neat package, but just the way that this episode should have and could have been a training montage that gets stretched out to 20 some minutes. Mm-hmm. You know, the pacing is just so rough with this one.
We have seen other episodes that were centered on training of individuals, right? Mm-hmm. That were more effective than what's going on here.
Oh, yeah.
I think this one was unfocused, and I completely agree with you. This isn't a bad episode, but it's somewhere in the middle on a binary scale. It didn't tip towards the thumbs up. On a 3-point scale, I would give it a 2. Like, I think it's, you know, it's whatever. It gives me more questions than I expected. I didn't expect to watch an episode and come out like, I wonder why this is. I wonder why that is. I wonder why this is. The 2 things that I said, 2 comments / questions. One, the fortune cookie for this, and I do not expect them to, like, mesh with the episodes, but it has nothing, it seems to have nothing to do with the content of this episode.
Oh yeah, they didn't even try with this one at all. No.
Right. Like if the intention was for Anakin and his crew to come in and be able to rise up the confidence level of this group because they're fearful of whatever, okay, maybe. But there's no fear that is being malleabilized.
No, I think you're even
into a weapon, right?
No, you're giving the writers even too much credit with that. I think they just picked a quote, plopped it in the front of this episode, and moved on. You know?
I think they did that with the title of the episode as well.
Yeah. It's
like, what two fronts is this war being fought upon?
The idea is mentioned at the very beginning of the episode that the idea is like, by training these people, it will lead Onderon to have to fight on two fronts, because not only are they fighting the Republic on the full Clone War side,
they're not. They're not, because Obi-Wan says, "Hey, you guys picked your side. We're staying out of it. Your king did his deed."
No.
So they're not even fighting the Republic. Like, they are. The king has aligned himself with the Separatists, but there is not active war on the planet of Onderon.
Not at the moment, but I think the idea is that because like the rest of the series has always, or we've had those episodes where there's like, we're a neutral planet, like we don't want to get involved, and then like of course by the end of the episode they get involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're like, oh, now we see the Separatists are going to try and mess us up, and we will fight back. You know, so I think that's where it's trying to lead its way down. You know,
yeah,
Again, I'm not justifying it. Again, I'm saying that this writing is just yeah. Like I think you're still giving it more credit than I am. Where like for me, this is a solid thumbs down. You know,
mm-hmm.
But like giving it more shades of gray. I'm not saying this is a shit episode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but for me, it's not like this wasn't one that's like, oh, if there are a few shifts here and there. You know, like as presented, no, I had no qualms about this one. I'm like, this is a thumbs down.
I watched this one twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The first time taking notes, and the second time uninterrupted. Right. And after I watched it the first time, I was like, okay, this is fine. You know, it's somewhere in the middle. It's not great, it's not terrible. And then I was thinking that I was honestly going to give this a thumbs up because of the introduction of Saw Gerrera, and I think that being introduced to Saw Gerrera and moving forward with his character in the way that it does throughout the Star Wars universe from here, I was like, okay, I'll give you this one. Like, not the most exciting thing, but then I watched it immediately a second time. And I feel like if I would watch it a third time and a fourth time, like each time I think my opinion is going to drop a little bit of this one. So I'm happy to cut it off at 2 viewings and say, you know, there's some entertaining things that happen. Way too many questions. And I don't feel the need to go back.
A third time. Other than the introduction of Saw Gerrera, I don't feel like I got anything out of this episode. Like, even to that degree, like, the Saw that we see here has flashes of the Saw we end up knowing. But even then, like, the introduction here is kind of botched as well. He's just, like, sort of this ensemble. They clearly didn't know exactly where they were gonna lead with this character
I don't think they knew that this was going to be a larger character in Star Wars history, right? He's not voiced by why am I
Forrest Whitaker?
By Forrest Whitaker. He's voiced by Andrew Cascino.
Yeah, and obviously this is a much younger Saw than the one we see essentially some 20 years later.
Are you talking about in Rogue One, or are you just talking about in general?
In Rogue One, and like, so we would see him in Clone Wars. The other chronological time we would see him is in Rebels. And then Rogue One is obviously towards the end, but that's quite the gap between this version of Saw and Rogue One. You know?
So how far in the future? Because Forrest Whitaker did voice Saw Gerrera in
Rebels,
in the Clone Wars also at some point in time, right?
No,
I thought so.
his first casting as Saw Gerrera is for Rogue One. It's going to be this Andrew fella for the duration of Clone Wars.
Okay.
Because the only other time Saw is played by Forrest Whitaker is in Rebels, because that got cast the other direction, right? So Rogue One comes out, but there's still more seasons of Rebels,
right?
So then they make the call to pull him in there, and then that's why that character design actually matches what Forrest Whitaker looks like.
Gotcha.
Whereas this Saw does not look like Forrest Whitaker at all.
Yeah, I was under the impression that there was essentially a little bit of character tweaking within the Clone Wars series, and Forrest Whitaker was brought in.
Well, no, because remember, Clone Wars gets canceled when Disney picks up Star Wars.
Very true.
Right.
Good point.
So that shit it's cut off, and then come 2016,
See, this is why you're here. So that all the dumb things that I think are true, you can just tell me I'm flat out wrong.
Right, yeah. That one I'm just going to call out doesn't make any sense. Cause there's no way that timeline matches up. So yeah, it's once we get to Rebels is where Forrest Whitaker shows up again. Because even with Rogue One, I mean, don't forget, like, he has different looks in the trailer, and they basically reshoot literally every scene with him. So he gets his whole haircut changes, but somehow they still were able to keep Forrest Whitaker in there. So,
hey, fair enough.
I mean, it's happened before where during reshoots they just literally have to recast people and reshoot literally every scene with that character. Because of scheduling issues due to reshoots, Yeah,
and or other less
nowadays
wholesome things.
Yeah, nowadays there are other but yeah, so
I think that's basically all that I have to say about this one. I'm interested to move forward.
Are you? I mean, I'm interested in moving forward in general, but not with this one. I remember this episode, just again, as I said earlier in this conversation, as being the introduction of Saw, but I now remember why I don't remember this episode otherwise. Like, I remember them training. I remember the point of the episode, right? But the ending of this episode's awkward as hell too. Like,
it just stops, man. It's not even like a completion of a story. Like, the completion of the story is when they defeat the droids, right? And then I think at that point, like I said, Obi-Wan should have been like, "Yo, bro, we're out." Like,
well, even
Anakin,
then, like,
we gotta go. Like, that's the end of that story. But then it like lingers on with like sneaking some fucking meat sticks through.
Yeah. Again, droid. It's the pacing. The pacing gets weird where it's like they keep laying down this track when like we had already cul-de-saced, Like this is almost like season 1 quality of storytelling,
Okay.
For Clone Wars, in terms of like this weird right, there's more story and we'll get to that next week, Like, God, this one did not excite me in the least. So
yeah, I have zero expectations of things to come. So I am happy to move past this one, and I am interested to see what happens next, because I really have no memory of the Saw Gerrera arc, as I think is pretty evident with my previous comments about Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, I remember this whole training interlude. I remember this whole training interlude. I vaguely remember what's coming. I remember Saw's arc in this series, but I don't remember the particulars of the next episode titled Frontrunners. That's the next one, right?
That is the only thing that I could tell you, is that Frontrunners is coming next, and that is season 5, episode 3. Other than that, I got nothing.
Close it out, man. Close it out.
All right. As always, there's a couple people we like to thank behind the scenes. That's Anthony at Blue the Beard that put together notthenerds.com. Head on over there if you want to talk to me about Forrest Whitaker and let me know how wrong I am about what movies or TV shows he's been in. Then there's also Kevin, and whom you can talk to on Twitter at They Call Me KDub. He put together our hero pose. And then, of course, Lindsay over at Strange Fantasy Music at gmail.com. Put together our intro outro music. Other than that, like Lorenzo said, we'll be back next week with Frontrunners season 5 episode 3. I've been Kevin.
Lorenzo here.
These are the nerds you're looking for.
Bye-bye.